So Matthew, you're next. I want to mention that until sometime this afternoon, Matthew thought he was going to have a very leisurely evening. He just found out this afternoon that he was needed to come here. We really appreciate your making the change at the last minute.
Well, thank you very much. Last week, I was giving an award to Stanford for an energy efficiency program that's been adopted here on the campus. And at the time, I noted that I was a graduate of Berkeley, so it was very difficult for me to give this award. So I figure the fact that I'm here tonight is somehow a revenge factory for my comments at the governor's award ceremony. Let me just give you, since I don't have a timed presentation, let me just give you an overview or a summary of some comments I made at a meeting of the Environmental Council of States several months ago when we were having a discussion with several other states, and particularly the state of Texas, about why we thought states in the United States should really get behind the President's Clean Power Plan and why we in California were supportive of the plan. The point I made at that point was that California was in the fourth year of a drought at the time. We knew we had tens of millions of trees that had died or were dying in the state. We knew that we had water issues throughout the state, and it was a real test to provide drinking water within the state. We know that we've got 6 to 8 inches of sea level rise along the coast. And in the recent set of storms down in La Jolla, they were measuring that the sea level was a foot higher than normal. And so for us, climate change is not some sort of abstract issue that we need to grapple with. For California, and from our perspective, it's a very real issue. Back in 2013, the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, which is part of Cal EPA, had done a study of climate change indicators in California. They identified some of those factors that I've talked about here tonight. They also talked about how changing climate was threatening agriculture here in California. So from our perspective, climate change is a very, very real issue that we need to deal with, and we need to deal with it in order to preserve California's economy and California's way of life. Now, how do you address climate change, particularly when you're only 1% of the greenhouse gas emissions in the world? We've done a number of studies, and we identified fairly early on in implementing AB 32, really the seminal legislation that started us with our climate change programs, that there were a whole number of paths that you could take to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and start to address climate change. At this point, I say generally in my discussions, and so being California, we decided, let's do them all. And so what you see is a wide variety of programs in California, all designed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in one particular way or another. It is changing the energy we use, and so we have our energy standards, which want us to go to 33% renewable energy by the year 2020. And when I talk about renewable energy, that is solar or geothermal or wind. We have energy efficiency standards. California's long been a leader in energy efficiency, and so we want to continue to work on energy efficiency so we use less energy, so we use less fuel. Our low carbon fuel standard, which is designed to reduce the carbon content of fuels in California by 10% by the year 2020. We've been pioneers, long-standing pioneers in advocating more efficient cars, and now we're really promoting electric vehicles, a way of dealing with greenhouse gas emissions. As many of you probably know, 37 to 40% of California's greenhouse gas emissions come from the transportation sector, so that's an important thing for us to deal with. And then we've got our cap and trade program, which frankly, when I looked at it, if we couldn't make the cap and trade program work, I wasn't too sure that anybody was going to look at cap and trade programs again, given the experience with some of the other programs that have been tried worldwide. But the Air Resources Board had done a very thorough job in looking at, where were our emissions coming from? How could we design this program? How many allowances should there be for this program? And then we've also embarked on sustainable community strategies. How can we reduce sprawl? How can we reduce vehicle miles traveled? How can we live differently in California so that we're using less energy? So we do have programs on promoting all those policy objectives today. And I'm pleased to say that it's a good story. Because we think we're on a trajectory to meet our goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions back to 1990 levels by the year 2020. And these programs have been working, we think, very, very efficiently, effectively. And importantly, because this is important to me, and I will be careful not to stray into economics here, because that's not my background, but I will say that some of you may recall that in 2012 there are references in the presidential election to California being a failed economy or a failed state. And frankly, California has been a leader in coming back from the recession. We attract a tremendous amount of venture capital into California, much of it into the clean tech industry. We've added, I think the figure that I was using last year was 500,000 jobs in 2014. A lot of those in the clean tech sector. So we've got a good economic story, in addition to the fact that we've been promoting these environmental programs. So I was content to live with those programs, work on those programs, keep an eye on the economy. But one of the things that became clear to me within several years after being the Secretary for Environmental Protection was that as much as I wanted to just sit in Sacramento and focus on California's programs, there was great interest worldwide in learning more about what California was doing and working with California. We have partners in our cap and trade program with the province of Quebec. And we continue to work with British Columbia, which decided to adopt a carbon tax, but we've maintained a very close working relationship with British Columbia. We've worked with other states along the Pacific coast, Oregon and Washington in particular. And what really struck me was the number of international interests there was in California's programs. And so really, other countries and other states reached out to us to enter into MOUs where we could trade information about our programs to reduce climate change. It's in that area that I got to know a little bit more about what China was doing and learn really about China's great interest in reducing its greenhouse gas emissions, reducing its fuel use. And we had some very, very interesting discussions concerning emissions trading programs, which indicated to me that they were very serious about doing something to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in China. That sparked, I was going to say fueled, I'll stay away from that. I shouldn't say sparked either. That really motivated us to continue to work with other states and national, subnational governments around the world. And the idea came up that we should really take this story that we're developing about how California is doing these programs, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, doing so without damaging its economy, and take that story worldwide to demonstrate that you can have these programs and be successful in these programs. And we found a partner in the German province of Baden-Württemberg. And that's what got us started on a program that we called the Under 2 MOU, which was a commitment to reducing greenhouse gases to 80 to 95% below 1990 levels by the year 2050, or keeping your emissions to 2 tons per capita. And we started talking about that goal with other subnational governments. And somewhat to my surprise, I'll admit, the concept caught on And we had a number of subnational governments and national governments that wanted to work with us to promote our climate programs and wanted to join in saying that they share this objective as well. And we want to tell the story about how we're moving ahead and how we're achieving our objectives. I think we're over 123 signatories at this point in time. We just added some new signatories last week. I think Massachusetts has joined in now. And importantly, the signatories are from all around the world. It's an important point, and I will just say that I had the pleasure of addressing the Secretary General for the UN, and I said, here's why I think you need to pay attention to what subnationals are doing. It's because we can demonstrate that these programs, there's skepticism about whether you can do anything about climate change and greenhouse gas emissions, but we think that our programs, not only in California, but in Germany and in the Netherlands and then in the UK and in Brazil, you can demonstrate these programs are being pursued and they are effective. And it's important that they're being done by provinces and states that have robust economies and are not afraid to take on these programs, and they're not afraid about the impact on their economies. And so it's very important that we have North Rhine-Westphalia, which is the Ruhr Valley, the industrial heartland of Germany, who signed on to this under 2 MOU. We've got Lombardy in Italy, the manufacturing seat of Italy, which has signed on to this MOU. And then we also have states in Brazil and Africa and Mexico, and we've received support from Chinese governments as well. So what we like to think is that the story is you can do these programs. They are being pursued, particularly at the local level. They're being done successfully. They're being done by economies that are strong economies and that are still prospering as they do these programs. And we're demonstrating that governments and countries that have very, very different economies and very different practices can all work together and collaborate together to deal with this common problem that we're all facing. So it's been tremendously rewarding. I know that the governor was delighted by the reception that he received in Paris. It was nice to be able to talk to world leaders about what's going on in California. And I'm very optimistic about the momentum that we've developed and how we can go ahead.
Thank you very much.